For our listeners in Hilton Head and Charleston, South Carolina, we hope you will join Dimensions Dance Theater of Miami as they tour to your area on March 22nd through 24th. Celebrated for their diversity and strong cultural relationships, Dimensions Dance Theater of Miami will make their debut at the beautiful Arts Center of Coastal Carolina with a program of signature works. A bold, cutting-edge contemporary ballet company founded in 2016 by former Miami City Ballet principal dancers Jennifer Cronenberg and Carlos Guerra, DDTM has established itself with a dazzling repertoire and dynamic world-class dancers hailing from various Hispanic, North and South American backgrounds. The company's tour to South Carolina will reach beyond the proscenium and into the community as they share some of their signature choreography with local youngsters on March 22nd and 23rd. On March 24th, audiences will be treated to a full evening performance, a mixed-bill program that will feature Gerald Arpino's masterwork Light Rain, a main staple of Dimensions repertoire since the company first brought the full ballet to South Florida in 2017. For tickets, visit artshhi.org or click the link in the description of this episode. I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Sean Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance.
On today's episode of Conversations on Dance, we are joined by Ted Brandsen and Rochelle Beaujean, director and associate artistic director of Dutch National Ballet. We are speaking to them in advance of the company's first tour to the United States in 40 years, which is to take place at the Ballet Sun Valley Festival in Sun Valley, Idaho. First, we talk with Ted briefly about his career and his directorship. Then Rochelle joins the conversation to discuss how they chose the repertoire for the upcoming tour and what they hope American audiences take away from the performances. Performances and additional events will be held this July 1st and 2nd at Ballet Sun Valley. Tickets can be purchased at balletsunvalley.org or click the link in the description of this episode.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are bridging the Atlantic through the powers of Zoom. We were so excited to talk about Dutch National's tour. It's the first stateside tour in 40 years. Is that correct?
That is right. It's been a really, really long time. Yeah.
Before we get into that, we'd love to just hear a little bit about your own performing career and your beginnings as a dancer with the company.
Okay, well, I actually started dancing while I was studying in the United States. After graduating high school here in Amsterdam, I didn't want to go to university straight away. I had not danced. I was 18. And I got a scholarship to go to college in upstate New York, Hamilton College. And I did all kinds of things, sociology, English lit, colonial history, and studied theater as well. And there was a dance department at Hamilton College. And a friend of mine took me there one day and she said, you should do something. You know, you're always showing off at parties and you should do some serious dance training. And I thought, why not? And after a couple of months, that's what I really fell in love with. And I wanted to do that. So I first tried to stay in the States. And my parents didn't have enough money for that. So I went back to Holland, auditioned and got into the National Dance Academy, which at that time was called differently. It was called the Scapino Ballet Academy. And I got in and did 3 years of, all the courses that I could grab in order to sort of catch up, because it was kind of a late beginner. And then eventually got into Dutch National Ballet, to my honest surprise. I was not expecting that to happen. I was expecting to go into a more contemporary field. But I was taken in and danced with the company for 10 years, doing all the rep, doing different sorts of roles, mostly more sort of contemporary classical work, but also the big classical productions. We're now doing Swan Lake, and I was just at the stage rehearsal this afternoon and looking at that. I was in the creation that's 35 years ago that was created. And so it brings back so many memories and of the whole period of when that ballet was made.
Yeah.
So that was my dancing career.
I wonder, for people, we like to talk about this for dancers who start a little bit later. I wonder if there was what you saw as an advantage and a disadvantage to that. I think Like I readily think of an advantage being like you must be very good at kind of seeing something and copying it and putting it on your own body. And is that something that came then to be helpful for you in your career? And what were some of the disadvantages that you found?
Well, the big disadvantage was your body is already formed. And at that point, I mean, we're talking about the late 70s. There were not that many men dancing. So it was much easier for a guy at the time to start late. One of the so the big disadvantage was that you're behind in terms of physical development and also technical development, because your body needs to learn things when you're young and absorb it, and you need to be able to train your body also in a certain way, and you can never overcome that disadvantage even in later. So most people who, like me, start at a later date also stop earlier because there's a limitation to their growth. One of the advantages for me was that I had seen a lot more of the world than most of my colleagues and most of my friends in ballet land, who some of them were 4 when they really started ballet, and that was all they did their whole life. So they didn't really have a chance to see or do or hear much outside of that. And I had done, pre-academic studies. I had been writing dissertations. I was much more informed, and that made me have a different view on the art form as well. And there were certain advantages to that. Yes, I could pick up quite fast. I could understand, better perhaps than some others, certain things, especially how the company worked, what the bigger picture was of that, because a lot of dancers don't get that insight. But there is something like a physical intelligence that all dancers have. And so you don't need to be necessarily a graduate student in order to be, or a top intellectual in order to be a fantastic dancer, because it's a different intelligence that is required. But it's definitely, most dancers are really smart people. And especially the ones that make it into a major company, you have to be not just physically talented, but you have to be really smart in order to make that work as well.
Right. So you said your career with the company was about 10 years, but I'm wondering, since you had this sort of, a different life experience before you led into it, did that open your mind then for the next step, the possibility being something like a leadership role like you hold now?
Well, quite early on, I was always involved in different initiatives. I'm one of the dancers, representatives. We started organizing a choreographic workshop. I was always involved in doing the other stuff around the company, and always, opening my big mouth and having something to say. I was not afraid to speak to our director, who was quite open and able to listen to different things. Rudy van Danzig was a great person, great leader and mentor. And so he also gave me a lot of opportunity once I started to do choreography, because I started to do that about 5 years into my dancing days, my dancing career, because I really felt like I wanted to have something to say myself. As a dancer in a major company, you're often seen as an instrument for the choreographers. You come in, you read on the schedule where you have to be, what you have to do. There's not that much say that you have yourself. And I was, cocky and wanted to do my own thing as well. So starting to make ballets was sort of a natural. And after doing that for 5 years and doing more and more and more outside of the company, I felt I needed to make a choice between either staying there as a dancer and sticking it out, or really going freelance and going my own way. And I chose to do the latter.
And how long were you then freelancing for before you took on your directorship position?
For 7 years. For 7 years, I worked all over, first in Holland, and also quite quickly internationally, all over Europe, even in the States, in Israel, Turkey, different places. And I did ballets for ballet companies. I did things for schools. I did big musicals. I did choreography for 300 extras for the opening of the Amsterdam sports stadium.
Wow.
I mean, weird things like that. So everything and anything I could do. And after a certain point, being a freelancer and traveling around the world was getting a bit tired because, well, I was in a relationship here in Amsterdam and I didn't see my boyfriend for like more than 3 weeks out of a year. That was just not really healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I felt the need to stay longer with the company and maybe take on a leadership role partly because in a lot of companies, I thought it could be done better. Without wanting to sound arrogant, I just thought, wow, this is, people are not doing this very smart or not very nice to the dancers, and they expect all kinds of things. But you have to remember, and this is something that comes up a lot also in a recent conference that we organized for ballet directors. Most ballet directors are all ex-dancers, have had no formal leadership training, and get in a position where they are responsible for sometimes 100 people or more, like I am now, and for multi-million-dollar budgets without actually having trained for that, which is kind of bizarre when you think about it. So it's not a miracle that there are companies where people do take on a leadership role and exactly replicate how they have been experiencing that, how they've learned from their predecessors, how they've learned from their directors. So we tend to propagate the mistakes of the past as much as the good things of the past as well. And so, yeah, I thought maybe we can try and break that, and maybe we can do things differently. And well, that's at least the arrogance that you have when you start that sort of stuff. So I got the chance to become a director in Australia at a company called West Australian Ballet in Perth. It's a company of, at the time, 20 dancers. Now they have 40, in what they were very proud to call the most isolated capital city in the world. So it was really far away, and I felt that was a good place to start and make mistakes because no one would notice. No one I knew would know about it.
That's funny. Wait, you mentioned just briefly though that do you have some sort of artistic director program that you're doing? Can you tell us about that? That sounds interesting.
2 weeks ago, we organized for the third time Positioning Ballet, which is a conference for ballet directors. This time, we limited it to directors of companies only. In the past, we've done this in 2017 and 2019. It's a biannual thing that we initiated because I felt there was a need for people in the industry to come together and to talk about topics that concern all of us and that we're not talking about. Because also ballet directors, not only don't they have any formal training, there is no sort of formal association for directors where you can get together and discuss issues that you all come. How do you deal with difficult dances? How do we deal? And that was the first topic in 2017. How do we deal with our heritage? What parts do we keep? What don't we keep? What parts are irrelevant nowadays? What parts are offensive nowadays? And how do we deal with that colonial history? How do we look for representation in a predominantly white art form as ballet, classical ballet? How can we bring that further? All these sort of things. What is an identity of a company when you have the same 10 choreographers making work all over the world? So this time, though, it was post-COVID. We invited only ballet directors I think we invited about 80 or 85 of my friends, but only 35 could come in the end. And we discussed topics as diverse as changing attitudes in dancers and a generational shift where dancers on the one hand want and demand more agency, and on the other hand, how do you deal with that in a hierarchy that classical ballet is? How do you deal with different expectations of body types? How do you deal with different expectations on gender positions? So a lot of complex subjects that people with different backgrounds and different companies from very different situations bring their own experiences to the table.
Rochelle, thank you for joining us. We're so glad that you are here. And we'd love to just hear a bit about this upcoming tour to Sun Valley, Idaho for the Ballet Sun Valley Festival. It's going to be the company's first stateside tour in 40 years. Obviously, touring is something that's only just now opening up to us after dealing with COVID for the past few years. So it's a very exciting time for the company. So maybe we could just hear a little bit about let's hear about the programming process for this. So how do we decide what ballets are going to make it on the tour? I'm sure there are a lot of things that go into this. You're trying to present the company, put the company's best foot forward for the first time being seen in the States in so long.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to budget things. We need certain dancers in certain places. So let's hear a bit about that process of preparation for the tour.
Yes, well, thank you for having me here. And we're very, very excited to come to the States, of course, and also this prestigious venue that lots of famous companies have gone to. About the programming, it's always in negotiation with, but what we find very important as a company is to show our signature. And one of the assets of our company is that we are always presenting Hans van Manen's works, which is always also for the audience is a great treat because his repertoire is huge. He's made 150 ballets, and amongst those there are several evergreens which we choose for touring because we know that both the dancers love dancing it and the audience gets a lot out of it. And they're very timeless ballets. So I think the audiences in America do really appreciate his work. And I think that's part of why we're doing his work here in Sun Valley. And then, of course, we want to feature all the talents that we have in the company, the great dancers that we have at the moment. So with the Hans van Manen ballets, we also wanted to present the Pas de Deux Le Corsaire because we have the dancers for it. They're guesting all over the world, so I think they should be with us on that tour as well. And the same goes for Grand Pas Classique. And then, of course, we have Vertiginous Thrill, which is William Forsythe, and we're presenting an evening of his in June this year. So it'll be very exciting because he's just been working on Vertiginous Thrill right before the tour. And so I think that's going to be very, very high level dancing for the audiences to see. So
if I can just add, we're also bringing a really beautiful duet for two men created by a female choreographer, Wipke Kandersma, who's one of our young creative associates. And it's set to original music and original composition from a Dutch singer-songwriter, Michael Benjamin. And it's a very beautiful, very tender duet between two men that, has a lot of room for different interpretations. And it's a strong female voice in choreography who we wanted to present as well.
Wow, that's so great. How do you guys, the two of you, sit down and discuss the repertoire that you're going to bring for a tour like this? I know you've given us this insight into how it represents you. What are the logistics then of like how many dancers can we bring, that sort of thing?
We sort of look at what would be a great program to bring, how many dancers would that involve. We were clear that we were not going to bring the whole company because the whole company is 80 dancers plus a junior company of 16. We weren't going to bring all of them.
Right.
So we looked at, what is the size, what is a good number that you can still present something that is attractive for a large audience and that doesn't really cost the inviting company or the festival an arm and a leg.
Right. There's so much to consider. Yeah.
No, it's interesting because we always also think about the menu, as it were. The performance is set up in a way that we have in the first program, for instance, Frank Bridge Variations, which is a very kind of very deep piece, which sets a certain atmosphere, and it then, the next number will be solo, which also will be danced by Alvan Ailey again this summer, which is actually one long solo by 3 men on Bach, which is very upbeat and fast, and so that's a big contrast. And then Trois Anciennes, which is a pas de deux, which is very lyrical and very inward and reflecting. And then the final ballet in that program is Five Tangos, which is like a festive group work with also solos and duets, and so there's that into account as well. Like, how do you build a program which has a good rhythm for the audience?
Mm-hmm.
So not only are these ballets that are part of the company's legacy, but they're ballets that both of you, I'm presuming, have danced. You have your own personal rich histories with. So in particular, the Hans van Manen works, can we talk a little bit about your relationship to those ballets and how you are able to pass those on to the dancers in the company now?
Well, I think Rochelle should speak to that more than me, because Rochelle was one of Hans's muses, and he created a lot of work on her.
Uh-huh.
I've been fortunate to be in some of his ballets, but I was never one of the chosen ones like she was. And Rochelle is now also director of the Hans van Manen Foundation, and as such responsible for organizing how his work is distributed around the world. So she can speak to this much better than I can.
Yes, I mean, Five Tangos, which I just spoke about, is actually the first ballet that I was in when I joined the company when I was 17. It's like in 1977. And it was very special because Hans took me as first cast for the Corps de Ballet for the 3 couples. And in your first year, this is quite unusual. And later he told me he just casted me by looking at me standing at the bar in between exercises. So it was kind of like more that than any, Grand Allegro that I was doing. So it was my first experience, and he was really tough as a choreographer. In a sense, he was very demanding, and he put me through the test, and I made it, and there was a click from first moment, and he knew he could take risk with me. He could ask me things to experiment, to be open to going further than just steps. And so from that moment on, I was always in every ballet. And if I wasn't on the foreground, I was maybe part of the group because he just wanted me there to create. And so most of the ballets I've danced, and I think in hindsight, we didn't realize then that we were creating all these ballets that are still being danced today. And so, because you're just working and trying your best, and now being director of the foundation, and I've seen all the other companies and all the other dancers having gaining so much of dancing his works and working with him, and that it's actually a big community, because everywhere in the world where I go, somebody has danced a piece of Hans van Manen, or is about to dance a piece of Hans van Manen, or has become a director and wants a ballet from him. So it's just very exciting to be part of some phenomenon like that, and I'm very aware of it. So and passing it on, it's for me my second skin. So when I have to teach a ballet, it's I don't consider it work. I feel like it's a joyful experience to share these wonderful ballets, and I feel very lucky because everybody loves doing them. So there's no struggle there, and we're very grateful that we have such a choreographer in our house at the Dutch National Ballet, because it's not happening every well, it doesn't happen that often. And
Right.
I just wanted to add to that because it is really quite amazing. You hear so much about. I mean, just recently, new publications about people who've danced at New York City Ballet who've worked with Mr. Balanchine, whose work, of course, is being done all over the world. And Hans is like that. His work is being done all over the world, and hundreds of companies are doing his ballets. And he's here, and we know him, and he comes into the studio, and his personal friend. I mean, it's such a great gift to be able to work with one of the greatest artists of our time in our particular field. So that's a real privilege, and to be able to bring his work also to other communities is something that we're very proud of and grateful for.
Yeah.
I love that story of him, Rochelle, casting you based on, just your essence. I think that's, I've heard that before. And I feel like I sometimes staged ballets for Justin Peck. And I think I've done that before myself. Like you connect with the essence of a dancer just by their being, or like how they hold their head or their hands or whatnot. But I'd like to get to that core a little bit more. Like, let's hear a little bit about what the quintessential Dutch national dancer is. What are you looking for in a dancer, and what do you think defines your individual dancers or makes them distinct from other companies?
Shall I start, and you can fill in? Because what we're looking for, obviously, you look for people who are technically proficient and strong dancers, and musical and all of that. We tend to have a very good-looking company, so I guess even if it's not, it's true. We have really good-looking dancers, and it's
You
not
can't help
a
the
criteria.
truth. It's just the way it is.
That's the way it is. But what we want, dancers with a sense of self, with a sense of who can bring something to the table, and everybody brings something different to the table. So we have a very diverse company, but I think that's one of the things that would identify. And Rochelle help me, just add to me. But no frills, no divas. Although we have some divas, but no foolishness. Every company has divas, but there's a sort of basic style that is very clean, that is very open, that is curious, that is positive, that is strong, that is not affected. One of the things that is very important in Hans van Maanen's work is that men and women are completely equal, and that women are always equally strong to men, different but equally strong. And that's something that has also defined how we look at other ballets that we do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no girly girls, princesses. There's strong, real women, and men that can be tender and soft, and not just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Rochelle, help me now.
No, you've said everything, and I think we even took that schooling, let's say, by Hans van Manen and Paas Rudy van Danzig, to look at dancers as people, and what they can bring as artists, rather than just the picture of the body. I think we also try to do that with our classics, and creating new classics, or revisiting the classics in such a way that they stay applicable to this time and age. So I think it goes further than just how we see dancers, but it also goes into what repertoire do we choose, how do we see classical ballet in the future. It's the whole thing, right, Ted? It's
yeah, absolutely.
Vision. It's a vision.
Yeah, and it has to do with dance as an independent art form that speaks for itself. That doesn't necessarily need a story, or it doesn't necessarily need to be pretty, and it's not. Dance is not decorative. Dance always has subtext, and there is, we're speaking with our bodies. We're speaking with. That's our language, and it can be and the language can be used to say many different things, and we can go from very abstract works like some of Balanchine's black and white ballets to to also story ballets, but it's never, it's the language, it's the dance that then tells the story. It's not about the sets and the costumes and the this and that. It's always the dance that's at the heart of everything. And I think in that sense, we do feel an affinity also with a lot of with what Brandsen did in New York and how he has influenced generations of choreographers. And someone like you mentioned, Justin Peck, whose work I really admire, and we've done work with him before, and we plan to do more of that. That's the sort of idea of dance as a contemporary, and classical ballet especially, as a contemporary art form that exists in and of itself. And that's really accessible and interesting, and for a large group of people.
Right. So, Rochelle, before you joined us, we were talking with Ted about some of the work that you guys are doing to collaborate with artistic directors, and kind of like you're talking about, change that conversation, maybe push that conversation surrounding classical dance and classical ballet. And so I wonder too, then, how you guys are working with your dancers in Hans' work, maybe, for example, to kind of guide this next generation that will end up setting his works, that will go on to work with foundations. That's sort of, how are you working with them to kind of push them forward in that way as well?
Well, obviously with Hans, for instance, there's so much we demand all over the world for his works, that I couldn't even set it all alone, and especially not with the job that I have now, because that's more than 60 hours a week. So I go out twice a year for now. Maybe later, when I'm with pension, I can go out more often. And but I think it's also important that his work lives through to the next generation and not stays stuck with me. And so what we do in turn in the house is we have in the recent years trained some of our ballet masters slowly. So for instance, I'll be setting a piece, and then they will be watching the first time, and then they'll see the whole process, and then Hans comes in and he does the final supervising for the last week, and they see what he wants. And so they take all that luggage, and then maybe the next time they'll be the ones setting the steps, and I will be supervising the last couple of rehearsals before Hans comes, and then ultimately they will be able to stage a ballet somewhere abroad without me coming, and eventually without Hans being there. So there is a kind of schooling going on, if you want to call it like that, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of conversation, and it's a whole schooling process in itself. Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm very happy. I think right now we have about between 12 and 16 stagers for Hans's ballet. So also some of them are ex-dancers from Netherlands Dance Theater, because he made a lot of works there as well. So and they were there when they were dancing when he created it, and so they can do the same with their background and the people that they know. So it's like, you throw a rock in the water and it's a whole puddle, a whole circle of rings coming out of that.
Right.
In a way, this is part of the larger mission that we feel in, as in developing the talent that we have that is here, and that goes for dancers who Rochelle's also coaching dancers. We have now some young dancers who are going to make their debut in Swan Lake, as Odette Odile and Siegfried, who came to us 8 years ago, just fresh out of school, and we've been working with them, and now they're now doing their first big principal roles. The same way we give opportunities to young choreographers and make them ready for hopefully taking on bigger things and developing as artists. We also are responsible for the heritage that we have, and Hans's heritage is very important and unique to us. So being able to do that is something that we do with love, but it's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. I feel like we may have mostly broadly covered this, but I'm just thinking when the company takes a stage in Sun Valley, what is the sort of core identity that you're hoping that audiences take away? What's going to make the company distinct to those audiences that in recent years they've seen PMB in San Francisco? What makes Dutch National different from those other companies that Sun Valley audiences have seen?
Well, I think in the repertoire that we chose, what Ted was saying, men, women equal. I think in the repertoire of Hans van Manen, he's been a fighter for emancipation of, I would say, not only men, not only gays, but also all women, people. So, and that is. I think our identity as a company through him, and also in the way we perform and the way we dance. So, and I think if we're talking nowadays about inclusivity, diversity, I think Dutch National Ballet has always, as long as I remember, been a forefighter for that. So it's not even a recent thing. It's just in our DNA. And I think the audience in America will maybe sometimes find it the repertoire direct and maybe bold, but I think it's done in Hans. He does it in such a way that it comes across so natural what he does that you look at the ballet and go, well, why didn't I see it like this before? So. It's also very, what's the word in English? Toegankelijk. Accessible at the same time, because he has a big sense of humor. Mm-hmm. So he puts things into perspective. He's not teaching anybody a lesson. It's just very entertaining. Right. And before you know it, you go down a different road, which is really fun. So I think that's going to be what I also hope that people enjoy.
And what we just this week had a visit from an American programmer and presenter who is bringing us to New York later on, and he said what struck him was our company was very diverse, much more so than most other European companies. And he said, "You have such good dancers, and they're so chic." That's not something that I would have thought, but they're really cool. They're really, there is a sleekness and a worldliness to them at the same time as being very athletic and open. So that was interesting for me to hear.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that the Ballet Sun Valley audiences will really enjoy your chicness this summer. And we're so glad that you guys took the time to share this programming with us and share a little bit about the company. We know it's just going to be fantastic, and the audiences are in for a real treat with all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.